Have they like Percy Jackson this and just made everyone adults for no reason? But, you know, we've thrown all of the rest of the plot out the window, so that's fine. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lizzie. I hope you're all having a lovely, lovely day. Today we're going to be talking about The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness and/or Chaos Walking, the 2021 film starring Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, because this is an adaptation of this. I first read The Knife of Never Letting Go, I think when it first came out in paperback, like very early on in its life. Absolutely loved it. Loved the whole trilogy. I met Patrick Ness once and got them all signed, and that's still like one of the best days of my life. And they're fantastic books that I loved when I was in my early teens. I still think they're amazing books, even though I haven't reread them in a while, and I should do that. And when I saw they were making a film, I had mixed feelings. I have since watched the film, and today we're going to chat through the film. Some things that worked, some things that didn't. I thought before we'd go into it, a little bit of, first of all, what it's about. This video will be full of spoilers for both the book and the film, just a heads up before we get any further in this. So yes, we're going to talk about what it's about and also my expectations going into the film, because of course your expectations going into a film colour your experience of the film. So I thought that would be worth discussing. So The Knife of Never Letting Go is a science fiction dystopia novel set in the future on New World, a planet that has been colonised or is in the process of being colonised by humans. And the main character is Todd. He is, in the book it states that he's 13, but in Earth years he's a little bit older than that. So he's about 14, 15, and he is the last boy in his village. His village is only men, there are no women, and he's the only one who hasn't yet come of age. And on this world, then there is this thing called the noise, where people's thoughts can be visualised and heard by other people. So all your thoughts are out there for everyone. Some people have learnt to control it, others not so much. And in the book, then Todd starts to discover the truth about the town he lives in, and that it's not all as it seems. And he goes off to go and find another town, which he didn't know. He didn't realise there were any other towns on this planet. He goes off to go and find one, and on the way meets Viola, she's just come from a new settler ship from the second wave of settlers and is trying to get back to her ship. I hope I did an okay job of explaining that. There's a lot going on in this book. When I first read this book, I think partly because it came out at around a time I'd been burned a few times, you know, the Golden Compass was still fresh in my mind, that I was like, this should never be a film. No one should ever even attempt to make a film of this, because it would make a terrible film. So the thought of even having a film of it was always a bit like, oh no, to me, because it just so clearly works so well as a book and in that format that I couldn't imagine how it would work in a film. Then I heard they were making it into a film, and I thought, oh well, yeah, of course that's what they do with like every single book that becomes popular. And then I saw they'd cast Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, and I thought, I mean, they're both good actors and big names, so clearly the studio is putting a lot of money and trust into this film. But also the characters are like 13, 14. Have they like Percy Jackson this and just made everyone adults for no reason? And then as I was sort of following, very vaguely following, production news, the first stills were released, I thought, oh no, they look bad. And then it was announced they were doing loads of reshoots, and I was like, oh no. They released the trailer and I watched that and I was like, oh no. And then one day it appeared on Amazon Prime with minimal advertising or huzzah, and I thought, oh no. So it's safe to say my expectations were on the floor going into this film. So I'm pleased to say it was not as bad as I anticipated. I mean, the bar was low, but it was not as bad as I anticipated. Before we start talking about the film, I think it's worth sort of thinking about what we want from an adaptation of a book, you know? Of course we want to see the characters and the world and the story that we love brought to life. I don't mind if they make some changes along the way if it's in the film's or TV show's best interest. Whenever I go into a film or a TV show of a book that I've enjoyed, I don't mind if they make some changes as long as those are for the better. So without any further ado, here are the things that I liked about the Chaos Walking film. First of all, and I think this is the biggest worry I had going into this film, and honestly they did such a great job of representing noise, that is the thoughts that people have in a visual and audible medium outside their heads that is distinguished from speech. I thought it was so good. The visuals were just perfect for it, and you could really see the way that this affects everyday life and the way that people live. And you could see the way that the mayor uses it to control everyone else. You could see all of that visually, and also you could hear it. I thought it was fantastically done, amazing. There were a couple of scenes where Todd just didn't have any noise, and I was like, surely he should have noise at this point? Like, you know, it would be just ordinary day-to-day things. But I was like, where is his noise? Where has it gone? So there were a couple of slips, but on the whole, I thought the noise was just chef's kiss. Generally, the casting was pretty good. Mads Mikkelsen, I mean, he was always going to be amazing as the mayor, right? He was always going to be great. When I saw they'd cast Nick Jonas, I was like, really? Nick Jonas? Actually, he was pretty good as Davy Prentice. You know, I thought he did a good job. It was believable, and after the initial, isn't that Nick Jonas? Then I just sort of went along with it. I thought he did a good job. I thought he was underutilised almost. His character kind of disappeared halfway through the film. I would have loved to see him in it a bit more. Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley were, of course, great because they're both really good actors who are seasoned sci-fi actors. Although I think at the point of filming this, when they started filming this a long time ago, I think that Tom Holland had done sort of one Spider-Man film and Daisy Ridley had done one Star Wars film. So this was very early on in their careers as sci-fi giants. But, you know, they have that reputation for a reason because they're both really good at what they do. That didn't change the fact that they were too old for the parts, but they did a great job with what they were given. And there were some interesting moments in the script, by which I mean bad moments in the script, that I really thought they did the best they could, and they really brought them to life. So, great casting all around. And just as a general thing about bringing the world onto the screen, the visuals, the sounds, just the aesthetic of it all, I thought was just fantastic. I'd never really given much thought into the visual aesthetic of this world, and you just never doubted it for a moment. It was a perfect blend. It was a perfect blend of science fiction and also like Western aesthetics, like as in, you know, old Westerns. I loved it. It was great, and it worked so perfectly for a world which is new land, newly discovered land, farmland, sort of towns set up very much in the way that like early settler towns would have been in the American West, but with that sci-fi twist to everything. And I thought it was sort of blended together so perfectly. The way that, you know, some of the characters had sort of worn clothes because they've been using the same things over and over again since they landed on the planet. The way that Viola's clothes were sort of different but still worked with the world. When I first saw the stills, I thought, this looks terrible, why is she wearing that? And the same thing with Todd, I was like, why is he wearing that? But when it was all brought together, it worked so well. Even Mads Mikkelsen, in his amazing Paris Fashion Week style coat, pulled it off. We only saw the spackle very briefly, but again, they were depicted in a way that felt like it was pulled straight off the page of the book. I think if you'd shown me a picture out of context, I probably could have said, hey, that's the spackle from Chaos Walking. You know, they looked like an illustration from a special edition of Monsters of Men or something. So yes, shout out to the design of the spackle as well. So those are the things that really stood out for me as things that I liked. All kind of world building things. But there were some things that I didn't like. So I mentioned earlier that Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley were really too old for these roles. I did read an interview with Patrick Ness where he was saying that he didn't mind that they were a bit older because one of the themes in the book is that there is no defining point of which you become a man or of which you become an adult, which is true. But I think a lot of the other elements of the story were lost because we were clearly watching two adults on the screen. There is a big difference between aging up 16, 17-year-old characters to be played by people in their early 20s and 13, 14, 15-year-old characters being played by people in their early 20s. And it just felt a bit too big of a disconnect for me, especially for Todd. I think for Viola, it worked a little bit better because she does have a bit more knowledge about the world, but it felt like there were points where you sort of thought, come on, Todd, you know, surely you've figured some things out in your clearly 20 plus years on this earth. So yeah, that was, I mean, it was a small thing, but I think it did make a big difference. At the start of the film, the exposition was a little bit clunky. There was a lot of kind of statements of things about the world. So at the very opening, then Todd bumps into Aaron, the preacher, and Aaron calls him a woman in a derogatory way, and Todd is like, I'm not a woman, I've never even seen a woman, there aren't any women here. And I'm like, you could have waited 30 seconds and we would have found that out just by seeing the town, you know, and you could have waited another 5 minutes and we would have found that out when he met Viola, you know, things like that. It was a little bit clunky. I didn't mind it too much because we did quickly get into the swing of the action at the very start, but then the plot just sort of vanished. At the start, a lot of things were changed from the book, which I didn't mind because I was like, you know, it's setting up for a slightly more cinematic story, something probably more familiar to sci-fi moviegoers. And it just sort of never took it anywhere. It just kind of stopped. Nothing really happened for the entire second half of the film. And so much happens in the book. So much happens. It was just a lot of like going through the woods, having another fight, going through the woods, having another fight, high stakes fight, going through the woods. You know, it was not much really happened. And then we got to the end. What even was that ending? I mean, you know how at the end of The Golden Compass, you're like, clearly they're not planning on making a sequel because they've just butchered the end of the book. That is child's play compared to what they did at the end of Chaos Walking. That has no resemblance to the end of The Knife of Never Letting Go. So, I mean, you know, they weren't going to make a sequel because they lost $75 million or something insane at the box office. But that's another story. So, they never made it to Haven to find that Mayor Prentice was now in charge, which is how the book ends. Instead, they had a big fight on an abandoned ship. And the mayor dies. But we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, Aaron dies, and so Aaron does die in the book, but had a very different death in the book. So Todd kills him in the book, and more importantly, so they changed it so that Viola killed him. Which, I mean, the fact that Todd kills Aaron is very symbolic of the sort of initiation that Prenticetown have for boys when they become men. So in Prenticetown, a boy becomes a man when they kill someone for the first time. So Todd killing the very man who enforced that is very symbolic as to the world. But, you know, we've thrown all of the rest of the plot out the window, so that's fine. Except Aaron then had like a brief moment of redemption at the end. Sometimes people don't need a redemption arc, you know? Sometimes they could just be evil, and that's fine. And it kind of took away from the character a bit, I think, that he genuinely thought... I mean, he always thought he was doing the right thing, but to have him die feeling like... I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It didn't work. I shouldn't have changed that. So back to Mayor Prentice dying. I can see why they did it. because it's a big sci-fi film, and at the end of a sci-fi or adventure film or whatever, you kill the bad guy, right? And he's the bad guy, so you kill the bad guy. The way that it happened also didn't really work, I think. He cannot control his noise. That's been a big theme throughout the whole book and the whole film, is that he can't control his noise, and that is a hindrance because everyone can hear his thoughts all the time. And of course, he finally figures out how to control his noise just in time to summon up an image of his dead mother to creep out the mayor and get all these other ghosts of women circling around him. He's never seen a woman before yesterday. How did he imagine all of these women? And it just felt so kind of he's figured it out. It felt so clean cut and easy. The last thing to briefly mention, and this is more of a pet peeve than something I didn't like, it was just something that I kind of missed from the book, is that we couldn't hear Manchi. Manchi the dog. We loved Manchi. And I mean, of course his story was sad. Of course it was. But I think, we were very attached to Manchi. And I completely understand why they changed it, because it just wouldn't have worked on screen. It would have been a bit naff, I think. But I did miss it. I think I would have preferred to have a worse film with a talking Manchi. So how does it hold up as an adaptation? The world building aspect, loved. Couldn't fault it. Fantastic. The plot? I mean, at the start it bore some resemblance to The Knife of Never Letting Go. By the end it bore no resemblance to The Knife of Never Letting Go. I feel like there were a lot of places they played it safe and took the easy way out. The book is just so good. It's so good, and I think if they'd stuck with the book more closely and not been tempted to make more of a sci-fi romp kind of film, then I think it would have worked out better. But did it work as a film on its own? Because most people going to see this film would probably not have read the book. So they need to go in and experience it all in a way that captures the book without relying on the book. And I really don't think it did. The things that I did enjoy, i.e. the world building and the cast and the noise and things like that, I enjoyed because I was seeing one of my favourite books on screen in a way that felt very real and immersive. If you didn't already know the story and the world, you wouldn't have that kind of sentimental sort of, oh, it's this that I have as someone who has read the book and loved it. Everything I did like about the film, I liked because I liked the book, not because of the film. And I think it's also worth mentioning that, and this is probably a product of just having lots of reshoots and being in development for years and years and years and years, is that some recurring things weren't recurring. So I mentioned the spackle earlier. They had one appearance, which, to be fair, I don't think they appear in the book very often, but they weren't really mentioned that much at the start. They didn't feel like a huge threat. And because in the film, as opposed to the book, then Todd knows the spackle are out there and alive, whereas he thought that they were all dead in the book. So there wasn't that shock value of, oh, there's a spackle and it's alive. It was kind of, hey, here's an alien, but it's not an alien because we're on an alien planet. And he's going to have one brief appearance and that's the end of that. And never appeared again. So I think if you were watching the film, having not read the book, you would be a bit like, where did they go? Because surely you bring the aliens back. If you're going to have a big fight at the end, you bring back the aliens, right? Pick one or the other. One or the other. And the other kind of recurring thing that just didn't recur is the song that Todd's mother sang to him as a child. We get literally 1 bar of it, 2 bars at the very start, if that. And then at the big dramatic moment when he conjures up the image of his mother to defeat the mayor, you hear the song. And a little bit of it is quoted in the journal entries that Viola reads, but if you don't know the song, you have no emotional attachment to it when it comes back at the end. That should be a moment of, oh, it's the song. And it wasn't. And it only was for me because I know the song, because I loved the book so much. This is embarrassing to admit. That I loved the book so much that I looked up the song and I sang it for, I want to say, my grade 8 singing. Maybe my grade 7. I sang it for one of my grades because you do an unaccompanied folk song. And I was like, hey, this is the words of the one from Life of Never Letting Go. Here's the tune, I'm going to sing it. So I already knew it. And also it's in Buffy. I already knew it. If you didn't already know it, you would have no attachment with that song. And when it comes back, you'd be like, wait, what? Oh, it's the song. You know, it lost that emotional punch at the end. So all in all, it was better than I expected, but I expected very little. The world building was good. Basically, nothing else really worked. It was so disjointed. It felt quite lazy at points in the script. And yeah, it just didn't really work. And on one level, you know, its success was definitely hampered by the fact that it came out during a pandemic. But there were a lot of other things wrong that certainly did not help. It's a shame that it wasn't a better film, but at least they got the noise right. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have watched the Chaos Walking film or read The Knife of Never Letting Go, then do let me know what you thought of one or the other, and also let me know what your favourite book to film adaptation is. That's all from me for today. I will see you next time. Bye!